Hey guys, Patrick Byrne with the Irish Tribune here to talk about Notre Dame's 35 to 14 win over Clemson. We can talk about the game a little bit, but I want to talk about the significance of the win and how big of a deal this win really is for the program. In as much as Brian Kelly helped build the program back up to respectability, the reality is the big wins are kind of few and far between for him in reality. A lot of his. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I'm not a Kelly hater, and I'm not here to necessarily bash Brian Kelly. All right. So let's be clear on that. But the reality is, a lot of his wins have come since Notre Dame, joined the ACC, and the schedule is a little lighter, a little bit easier. The ACC, as we know, is not an incredibly deep conference, and not necessarily all that difficult for Notre Dame to beat a lot of these teams. So I think some of that success has come because of that, but that's a podcast for another time. The big wins that Brian Kelly had, a lot of those wins either happened away from home, or the win is kind of a close loss. Okay, so the Florida State game, that was a close loss. Really should have been a win. That was ridiculous call at the end of the game, but regardless. So we'll consider that kind of a win because it was a close loss. Okay, then you have the Georgia games. One of them at Georgia, lost by a touchdown. They were in the game, but didn't necessarily, obviously not like the Clemson game. They it was a more difficult game. But again, lost by a touchdown, but had the ball, had an opportunity to at least tie it at the end, and obviously didn't come out with the win. Then Georgia at home, losing 20-19, and okay, we'll use that game as the example. Here's the difference between that game and this game, and obviously there's a ton of differences as far as the actual game goes and what happened, because Notre Dame dominated Clemson, whereas with Georgia they kind of just hung in the game and played a physical brand of football that was consistent with what Georgia was doing. But the biggest difference between these two games in my mind, regardless of outcome and anything else, is that Notre Dame Stadium actually felt like a home field advantage in this Clemson game. And I cannot remember, well, actually I can, the last time Notre Dame Stadium felt this way for me as a fan watching the game was the Lou Holtz years. I mean, that's reality. Maybe the only other game that felt somewhat like that was the Bush Push game against Southern Cal. Okay, because that was built up to be such a big game, and it was, and the crowd was absolutely into that game too. So I would say Bush Push game, that's absolutely on the table to be able to say that this game was similar to that. But the only other time that I can think that Notre Dame had this kind of advantage, again, was absolutely 100% the Lou Holtz era. What was different about it was that it was a night game. The stadium has the video board now. They've got the ribbons going around the stadium with the green. They've got the music. It feels like a college football atmosphere that's consistent with what college football is now. Now, there's a lot of purists that would say, well, I hate it. I wish they would just go back to being what Notre Dame always was before. But you have to kind of, in as much as you can stay within tradition, the tradition of the program, you have to change with the times. And I think Jack Swarbrick has done an incredible job of that at Notre Dame in changing with the times. When it comes to the field turf, again, the video board, all the other things that he's done, having the Shamrock series with, the change in the uniforms. There's just things that you have to do to be able to attract the talent that you need to attract to have the ability to win a national championship. So, this game to me was the culmination of the Brian Kelly era, kind of leading us to this point. Now, would Brian Kelly have won this game the same way? I don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible. But I think what happened was, Freeman and Reese, and certainly Al Golden as well, finally realized, hey, this is who we are, and this is the only way we're going to be able to win this game. And shockingly to me, as a fan watching this game, I'm like, this offensive line has finally come into their own in this game. Now, it's difficult because you think about it and you're like, well, why didn't this happen against Stanford? This is why we love college football, is because a team gets better throughout the season. Certainly could happen in the NFL as well, but it happens so much more in college football. You see this where a team starts out 2-2, and then they win 8 straight, go 10-2, and go to a major bowl. It happens a lot. There's other teams that start out 6-0 and finish 7-5 or 6-6. That happens too. So it's one of the reasons that we love college football. It's also frustrating. So you can't necessarily. You've got to look at the totality of what you're doing, and you just got to look at it in pockets and say, okay, the Stanford loss was terrible, but they are six. Notre Dame is 6-1 in the past 7 games, and they're making progress and they're making strides with a backup quarterback who, quite honestly, isn't very great as a quarterback. Consistently getting passes batted down. I mean, hell, in the Clemson game, a guy batted down a pass with his armpit, for God's sake. So, it's just one of those things where you're not going to have the ability to throw the ball downfield. It's frustrating. And we were all, as fans, somewhat frustrated with the Ian Book era and the inability to do that as well consistently. But, Ian Book is an infinitely better quarterback than Drew Pine when it comes to throwing the ball down the field. And that's kind of terrible. If this team had Jack Cohn running the ship this year, I think they would probably have one loss. They would have lost to Ohio State. But again, some of the things that Pine can do, Cohn couldn't do. Cohn wasn't mobile. Pine's a little more mobile. And keep in mind, again, Pine is a backup. So, Reese and everybody else, they had a plan coming into the season and a strategy to utilize Buckner. And they've had to pivot from that. And this is, again, the culmination of that pivot was this game. So the hope is that they'll continue to be able to build on it, see what they can do against Navy, Boston College, and Southern Cal. And again, as a fan, this is way bigger than to me, to win this game at 6-3, 5-3 going in, and to make it 6-3 and to beat number 4 Clemson, this is way better than Notre Dame being undefeated and getting annihilated in a playoff game. And the reason for that is that this happened at home, ton of recruits at the stadium. It helps with recruiting. It helps you get better athletes to have the ability to play that playoff game eventually. Sometimes you have to take a step back to take 3 steps forward. And I feel like this game was that game. So that, to me, is why it's such a big deal. So again, let's see what the Irish can do the rest of the season, but just really excited about this game, about this win, and to see what it'll do for the future. Okay, guys, everybody appreciate this game this weekend against Navy. It's always a tough one. Let's hope ND can pull it out. It's only about a 2-touchdown spread at the moment, so we all know how it goes. There's not going to be a ton of offensive possessions. Hopefully Notre Dame doesn't try and get too cute trying to pass the ball down the field against Navy's horrific pass defense. Just keep running the ball, man. It's what you do well. All right, guys, have a good week.